Jeffrey, you have a very important tweet that is a important prompt for something that might be occurring. You say, quote, "Is nuclear war really part of the plan to foil an incoming Trump administration? I would not rule it out. In January, February 2020, the deep state did the unthinkable and abolished the Bill of Rights and established martial law under the guise of virus control. Anything is possible." Jeffrey, please explain.
Well, I'm very concerned about the next 2 months, and we're seeing some very terrible trends. The idea of authorizing war against Russia without congressional mandate, the forgiving of $4.7 billion in debt owed by Ukraine, the quick efforts to approve these judges. What you have is a regime that has been totally discredited by the American system, thrown out, bonked on the nose, really repudiated and denounced by the American people. And now they're using all their power in a kind of a panic to clean up the messes, with shredder trucks out in front of the Department of Justice. This authorizing of war is next level crazy. So I'm very concerned about the next 60 days. What's remarkable about this is that the efforts that they're doing right now, all their actions are transparent and grotesque, and everybody understands exactly what is going on. We've got a regime in panic. DC's in panic about what's coming, and they're doing everything they possibly can to what it really means is that they're willing to burn down the house rather than leave it, essentially, and it's pretty terrifying.
Not only is it terrifying, it's diabolical. I mean, these people would rather see the world go to ashes than Donald Trump govern it. Is that a fair summary?
Charlie, thank you just for saying that. I mean, when I first saw all this happening, my mind raced back to a comment made by the economist Günter Reimann in 1939, writing from Berlin. And he said, "I think that these people are going to be willing to go to war and destroy everything about the German nation, everything about society. There's nothing they won't do to preserve the party. They're going to go down with it, and they're willing to torch everything." And that's what he said, and that's what he predicted in 1939. And those words have been echoing in my head because there's nothing more awful than a corrupt, would-be totalitarian regime that's been discredited by the people still holding on to power. They have 60 days, and it's a very dangerous time for America. When the founders left this period between the election and the inauguration, the presumption was that the outgoing regime was going to be responsible and adhere to the rule of law, and we would have a smooth transition. That is not what we're seeing here. We're seeing the sort of next level scary, and nobody has any power to do. It seems to have any power to do over it. I know there's been articles of impeachment introduced, but those offer their own complications. I mean, so what? Because here's the thing: everybody knows that this decrepit corpse in the White House is not really the president, not really making the decision. It's not everybody. Nobody has any illusion about this.
This is really important, though, Jeffrey. Is that, and as someone who understands the power of the administrative state over the last 100 years. I mean, you've done more research and more speaking about this, is that we're not being governed by a president anymore. We have veered off in the last couple decades. We are now being governed by this super elite of a couple hundred experts. And that is even more dangerous than, a quote unquote dictator in some ways. How do you disassemble that?
Charlie, you're exactly right about that. And I would say that in general, this is even though the problem dates back 100 years, you're right about that. Americans are just now newly alert to this. I mean, for that matter, I'm kind of newly alert to it, and it's a little overwhelming. And the thing about this administrative bureaucracy is that there's nobody to take responsibility. We don't know who's making these decisions over something that could lead to nuclear war. I mean, is there anybody stepping up and saying, "Yeah, I did that. That was my choice. That was my decision. And here's why I did it." There's nobody. We don't have a name. We don't have anything. It's the way these committees worked. And I began to realize this more and more. We've all learned so much about government over the last years. But I remember there's this moment where Fauci was being grilled by somebody in Congress about the approval of these shots that caused several officials of the FDA over vaccine safety to resign. And they said, why did you approve that? And he said, well, I didn't approve that. That was approved by this committee over here at FDA. And they said, well, why did that committee approve? He said, well, they didn't really approve it. All they did was ratify the decisions by another committee of the CDC. And then you ask that committee, and it's like, oh, well, it was that other guy, it was that other guy. So it becomes a sort of gassy and opaque. And yet you have these momentous decisions that have huge impacts on people's rights and liberties. And in the case of war, their lives. And yet there's nobody willing to take responsibility. This is not the American system. And the founders did not set up the government to be so detached from the people this way. Their specific plan was that the people would rule in America through their elected representatives. They would take responsibility for their decisions, and if they were the wrong ones, they'd get voted out of office. But these bureaucrats who are making the decisions behind the scenes are nameless. They bear no responsibility for the consequences of their decision, and you can't even get rid of them according to the rules of the civil service. This is un-American, and this is why so many people are outraged and clamoring, screaming, yelling, demanding dramatic changes immediately. And I think those are probably coming. My best guess is that they're coming. At least, Team Trump is going to do everything it possibly can to achieve it. What worries me are the next 60 days, because DC is in a total panic right now. They freaked out about Schedule F. You remember in October of 2020, which was it was nothing other than hey, what do you guys do around here? If you're doing policy and you're not really supposed to be doing that, you're going to be reclassified as an employee who can be terminated, maybe. Okay, that was it. And at the highest estimate, something like 50,000 people may have been reclassified. The whole of Washington was a meltdown. It didn't get a whole lot of public attention, but the Washington Post and The Hill and Politico and all these publications were just freaking out. And the Biden administration immediately reversed that executive order. And they've been working all these years to entrench the bureaucracy. Well, I tell you what, Team Trump has also been working all these years. Forget Schedule F. Yeah, they could pass that and probably will, maybe. We're talking about now getting rid of the whole of the civil service, which, you know what, Charlie? I favor that because it's inconsistent with the Constitution. These people should be at-will employees. And now we've got Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy coming in there. And they have an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal today, which is talking about, using tools. And they can do it, especially with the majority in the Senate and the House and the right appointees. They can accomplish this task. They're talking about maybe cutting 80% of the bureaucracy at this point and abolishing 40 years of regulations. And you know what? Americans will cheer. They will cheer for the first time in our lifetime. We have a public consensus that the system is out of control and we need something dramatic to happen to stop it. But these promises, and they're credible ones, I believe them. I'm very excited. I could probably say it was nothing like this in Reagan's first term. I mean, this is a definite, public consensus and a fever pitch for reform. But now you've got Washington in a total freak-out mode. We've got 60 days between now and then. It's going to be a tug-of-war between the totalitarians on one hand and the reformers and the freedom lovers on the other. It's an epic battle, and it's going to take us right up to the inauguration.